Please help me welcome Gail Rubin, the loved one.
The Loved One by Evelyn Waugh. Evelyn Waugh was a man. His first wife was also named Evelyn, and their friends called them he Evelyn and she Evelyn. Evelyn Waugh also wrote Brideshead Revisited, that we are familiar with thanks to PBS. It came out in 1945. And in 1947, Evelyn Waugh went to Hollywood to see about having Brideshead Revisited made into a movie. And while he was there, he visited Forest Lawn Memorial Park, which is part of the satirical novel, The Loved One. So this satire came out in 1948, and it was made into a movie in 1962 or 63. And it does follow the book to a great degree. Now, the hero, quote unquote, of our novel is a gentleman named Dennis Barlow, who is an Englishman who's living in Hollywood, and he works at a pet cemetery funeral home. And he's going to work as we begin our reading. Dennis Barlow went to work after dinner. He drove toward Burbank, past luminous motels, past the Golden Gates and flood-lit temples of Whispering Glades Memorial Park, almost to the extremity of the city, to his place of business. His colleague, Miss Myra Posky, was waiting for him, hatted and freshly painted. I hope I'm not late. You're sweet. I've a date at the planetarium, or I'd stay and fix you some coffee. There's been nothing all day except mail a few remembrance cards. Oh, and Mr. Schultz said if anything comes in, to put it straight on ice in this hot weather. Goodbye. And she was gone, leaving Dennis in sole charge of the business. The office was furnished in somber good taste that was relieved by a pair of bronze puppies on the chimney piece. A low trolley of steel and white enamel alone distinguished the place from 100,000 modern American reception rooms. That and the clinical smell. A bowl of roses stood beside the telephone. Their scent contended with the carbolic, but did not prevail. Dennis sat in one of the armchairs, put his feet on the trolley, and settled himself to read. Life in the Air Force had converted him from an amateur to a mere addict. There were certain trite passages of poetry which, from a diverse multitude of associations, never failed to yield the sensations he craved. He never experimented. These were the branded drug, the sure specific, the big magic. He opened the anthology as a woman opens her familiar pack of cigarettes. Outside the windows, the cars swept past continuously, out of town, into town, lights ablaze, radios at full throttle. I wither slowly in thine arms, he read, here at the quiet limit of the world. And repeated to himself, here at the quiet limit of the world. Here at the quiet limit of the world. As a monk will repeat a single pregnant text over and over again in prayer. Presently, the telephone rang. The happier hunting ground, he said. A woman's voice came over the phone, hoarse, it seemed, with emotion. In other circumstances, he might have thought her drunk. This is Theodora Henkel, Mrs. Walter Henkel of 207 Via Dolorosa, Bel Air. You must come at once. I can't tell you over the phone. My little Arthur. times he's been away like that before. I said to Mr. Henkel, "But Walter, I can't go out to dine when I don't know where Arthur is." And Mr. Henkel said, "What the heck? You can't walk out on Mrs. Lester Scrunch at the last minute." So I went, and there I was, at the table, at Mr. Lester Scrunch's right hand when they brought me the news. Hello? Hello? Are you there? Dennis picked up the instrument which he had laid on the blotting pad. "I will come at once, Mrs. Henkel. 207 Via de la Rosa, I think you said." I said I was sitting at Mr. Lester Scrunch's right hand when they brought me the news. He and Mr. Henkel had to help me to the automobile. "I am coming at once." I shall never forgive myself as long as I live. To think of him being brought home alone. Oh, the maid was out and the city wagon driver had to telephone from the drugstore. Hello? Hello? Are you there? I said the city wagon driver had to telephone from the drugstore. I am on my way, Mrs. Henkel. Dennis locked the office and backed the car from the garage. Not his own, but the plain black van, which was used for official business. Half an hour later, he was at the house of mourning. A corpulent man walked down the garden path to greet him. He was formally dressed for the evening in the high fashion of the place. Donegal tweeds, sandals, a grass-green silk shirt, open at the neck, and an embroidered monogram covering half his torso. "Am I pleased to see you?" "Mr. W.H., all happiness," Dennis involuntarily said. "Pardon me?" "I am the happier hunting ground," said Dennis. "Ah, yes. Come on in." Dennis opened the back of the wagon and took out an aluminum container. "Will this be large enough?" "Plenty." They entered the house. A lady, also dressed for the evening, in a long, low gown and a diamond tiara, sat in the hall with a glass in her hand. This has been a terrible experience for Mrs. Henkel. "I don't want to see him. I don't want to speak of it," she said. "The happier hunting ground assumes all responsibility," said Dennis. "This way," said Mr. Henkel. "In the pantry." The Sealy ham lay on the draining board beside the sink. Dennis lifted it into the container. "Perhaps you wouldn't mind taking a hand?" Together, he and Mr. Henkel carried their load to the wagon. "Shall we discuss arrangements now, or would you prefer I call in the morning?" "I'm a pretty busy man mornings," said Mr. Henkel. "Come on into the study." There was a tray on the desk. They helped themselves to whiskey. "I have a brochure here setting out our service. Were you thinking of interment or incineration?" "Pardon me?" "Buried or burned?" "Burned, I guess. I have some photographs here of various styles of urn." "Your best will be good enough." "Would you require a niche in our columbarium, or would you prefer to keep the remains at home?" What you said first." "And religious rites? We have a pastor who is always pleased to assist." "Well, Mr. Barlow. Mr. Barlow, we're neither of us what you might call very church-going people. But I think on an occasion like this, Mrs. Henkel would want all the comfort you could offer. Our grade A service includes several unique features. At the moment of committal, a white dove symbolizing the deceased soul is liberated over the crematorium crematorium. Yes, said Mr. Henkel, I reckon Mrs. Henkel would appreciate a dove. And every anniversary, a card of remembrance is mailed without further charge. It reads, your little Arthur is thinking of you in heaven today, and wagging his tail. That's a very beautiful thought, Mr. Barlow. Then if you will just sign the order. Mrs. Henkel bowed gravely to him as he passed through the hall. Mr. Henkel accompanied him to the door of his car. It has been a great pleasure to make your acquaintance, Mr. Barlow. You have certainly relieved me of a great responsibility. That is what the Happier Hunting Ground aims to do, said Dennis, and drove away. At the administrative building, he carried the dog to the refrigerator. It was a capacious chamber, already occupied by 2 or 3 other small cadavers. Next to a Siamese cat stood a tin of fruit juice and a plate of sandwiches. Dennis took his supper into the reception room, and as he ate it, resumed his interrupted reading. Now this scene, while it's for the death of a pet, you still have all of these choices to make for the death of a person. And while some people may be more upset over the death of their pets, over the death of their people in their lives, you still have a lot of choices to make under duress of grief. And this reading highlights the need to shop around ahead of time. So remember, just like talking about sex won't make you pregnant, talking about funerals won't make you dead. Start a conversation today.